My name is Steve Schmitt. Come on in. I founded a company called Loud Mountain. We started about a year ago. We went live in July of this year. So we are probably 2 or 3 months into going live. But today we're not going to talk about Loud Mountain. I'm here to speak about what I see happening, what we see happening in the industry, the recruiting industry, and some of the trends that social media is bringing to what is going to be a very serious problem in the very near future, both here in the United States and in Europe. There is a massive employment shortage that will happen in the next 20 years because of the birth rate in the United States and the 15 EU countries. And there's going to be a big problem that's facing both continents with having enough professional and technical employees. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, where the companies are attacking this problem and trying to solve that. So the monster is dead because of you. So the title here, I'm sorry, it might be a little bit different in your books, but the title is essentially Monster.com, the job board, is slowly losing its relevance in the industry. At one point in time, it was the monster. It was the company that controlled the job board business. And this is representative of all of the job boards, Career Builder, Dice, just not Monster. But, so anyway, I'll get started. So just so you understand a little bit about my background, I've been in the IT business for about 20 years. I started as a software engineer. I've been a chief information officer. Actually, I was the chief information officer of the city of Pittsburgh in a company called Force Systems, which was fairly well known, that we sold about 10 years ago. And then I refer, instead of an entrepreneur, I call myself a small business owner. So since that seems to be the political term today, us small business owners who need all the tax breaks and the incentives to grow the economy. So you're here. And you can't see this picture very well. Is it all right if I turn the lights off? Yeah. Thank you. Anyway, this is a good view of, I think, one of the best views of the region. It shows the southwestern Pennsylvania, the Great Lakes, and even the coast. And this is what our view was not too long ago about where we did business, who we knew, and come on in. And it's changed significantly. Now it's the planet. And so as we communicate across the world bidirectionally through this new medium, we have to understand, we'll try and hopefully it will teach give you a better perspective of where we think the industry is going as it relates to talent management. So this is a warning, disclaimer, that I'm not just picking on Monster. I'm not picking on them as a company. I'm just using them as an example. So anyway, this is the way we used to find jobs. So if you're out there looking for your first job, I'm sure some of us did that. We looked at the 1 ounce, and that's how we found jobs. Well, that certainly has changed. And even back in colonial times, that's the way we found jobs. And we used to look like this when we went to work. All right? So we don't look like this anymore. As a matter of fact, people, if you had to wear a tie to work now, you'd probably want to choke yourself with it. So, so the economy, the way we work and the way we interact and the cultures of all these different companies around the world are changing very, very rapidly. If we look at the United States, if we look at the population growth of the United States, you can see that we've leveled off. And we have known we will be shrinking the economy. As a matter of fact, it shows the population growth, but it does not show, which I should have on here, is the size of the workforce, which will be significantly shrinking. At the same time, a tremendous demand will happen in a lot of industries, including technology, healthcare, energy. And the problem is, how are we going to find all these people? If we look at the EU, the problem is much worse. Look at the 15 countries in the EU. We're talking about being at pre-1960 numbers in population in the 15 countries in the EU. And once again, this is going to cause a great demand for the worker. And what's going to happen is now the worker will become the person that has, is in the proverbial catbird seat. They will have the ability now to control their destiny and be much more selective in where they have to go to work. Sure, we're in a recession and we're still coming out of it slowly, and there's 10% unemployment. But in many sectors today, there is a great shortage of workers. And very soon, that will get much worse. So, $117,000. $117,000 represents the cost to any organization who makes a bad hire. So if you go out, you recruit an employee, you bring them on board, they start working, and they don't work out. This is on average a $90,000 position in the professional world. It costs your organization $117,000. It's a very expensive thing to get wrong. Software engineering. Reports have stated that it costs $1 million to your organization if you hire the wrong software engineer. They could write code that is just poor, and it would take many, many people to figure out what the problem is, and it could cost your organization up to $1 million. The cost to a nurse, hiring the wrong nurse or therapist or doctor, who knows? We know that these costs can get astronomical. As a matter of fact, I'm sure the folks at Transocean and BP would like to have selected their employees a little better. So this is the most important decision companies have every single day, is the recruitment, selection, and hiring of employees. So to recap, we have a shortage happening both in the United States and the EU. And the workplace and how we work is significantly changing. And so we saw this a little bit around 1996. When the internet first came, Internet 1.0, everything changed. And this individual, the e-baby, is iconic to what that meant in that time. It democratized the buying and selling of stocks and bonds in the industry. It can fundamentally change the way people interact with the stock market. And now, hopefully, back then, many companies were born that changed the industry. One of them, for instance, is still in third place in their industry, and it's a job board, it's Monster. It has 1.1 million job openings today on its website. So Monster has 1.1 million open jobs on their website. They have 40 million resumes in their database of, quote, active candidates. Last year's revenue was $1 billion. And their market capitalization is $1.6 billion. And the ironic part of this whole thing is that 99% of the time, it's ineffective. It doesn't work. 99% of the time that people apply for a job or someone interviews someone from the Monster's source, a database, it's ineffective. So this is a company that can generate $1 billion in revenue and still be 99% wrong. It's an amazing statistic. And if you look at it, if you look at this website, I pulled this off yesterday. So I typed in software engineer for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And what did I get? Right? It said that I should be interested in working in 7-Eleven. It said that I should be looking for another degree, for an online university. But I'm looking for a job in software engineering. So the question is, job boards, Dice, Career Builder, Monster, they're losing market share rapidly to new companies and new ways of doing business. And social media is actually creating that opportunity. We saw it first, I would say, the most clear, bless you, is in the presidential election. And this was early on, too. If you look at the numbers, in the election in 2008, we still only had 134 million registered users of social websites. And now we're up to well over 600 million. And this signifies, this is, to me, the revolution that we're seeing today in blogging and in social media and what we call Web 2.0 is as significant, if not more significant, than it was back in 1996. For instance, this is off Facebook's website 2 months ago, and this is up to 700 million. 500 million minutes a month, or 500 million minutes. I'm sorry, thank you, 500 billion minutes a month, every month on Facebook, registered users. 500 billion. So to put that in perspective, there's 525,000 minutes in a year. If you do the math, that's 950,000 years that folks are on Facebook every single month. And so, to put that in perspective, 60 years ago, the computer was invented. 5,000 years ago, the wheel. And what I consider the birth of blogging was cave drawings 32,000 years ago. And of course, 950,000 years ago, the same amount of time that people spend on Facebook every month is when humans discovered fire. So every month, we have, it's just amazing statistics, 950,000 hours on Facebook. And how much money do people make using these websites? Nothing. All of this, there's no commerce really being taking place in what we call social media. Now, there's a reason for that. And the reason, we believe, is that it's all about demographics. So Facebook has a tremendous amount of their user group is between the ages of 14 and 34. Well over 60% of registered users in Facebook are between the ages of 14 and 34.
Can you actually clarify that?
Sure.
Are you saying that as a user, you're not generating any profit, or like Zynga, for example, is not making any money on Facebook with their apps?
The end user, the person that's using the site, typically overwhelmingly do not make any money using Facebook. Now, there's companies that are starting to make money, and companies that are doing quite well revenue-wise. They're not making a profit yet, but there's a lot of companies out there that are starting to get into business and starting to commercialize. I'm going to talk about a few of those companies.
I know a lot of companies who do make a lot of money.
What's that?
I know a lot of companies who make a lot of money on social media. So
Right.
Facebook, Twitter.
But the user doesn't.
Right.
The individual registered user.
Well, I guess it's just a weird statement because what user makes any money on any website?
True. Well, that's true.
So that's why I was confused. I couldn't tell because it's like I don't ever make money on any site.
On using the website, just like you don't make money watching television.
Right. Exactly.
Right. But it seems like be a tremendous waste of time, is what I'm saying. And I'm saying that now that we believe, and I think you'll see, a lot of companies are starting to commercialize or take advantage of commercializing that activity on the website. So, for instance, my LinkedIn profile. I have 372 connections. 372 connections really connect me to 4.7 million people on LinkedIn. If you take it to the fourth level, you're pretty much talking about the entire United States. Now, 2 years ago, really, LinkedIn didn't exist. I mean, the ability for organizations and for individuals to reach into companies and have access to managers, hiring managers within these organizations is amazing today. And so now the leverage really comes back to the individual and what they want to do with the opportunities that are provided here in LinkedIn and soon to be Facebook. 80% of companies plan to recruit through social networking this year. 80% of companies in the United States plan to be recruiting in social networking. And that's why we see companies like Monster stock going way down because of that fact. So, this organization goes away. Same with this. We don't meet folks in the bar anymore, right? More than 1/5 of every marriage and 1/4 of every marriage this year happened online. And why did it happen? Because of social media technology. It's because of the ability to do bidirectional communication between individuals, and this same technology is now being deployed for hiring individuals. The same technology. So it's coming. The next trend that we see in the industry is that contingent working is going way up. So in 2005, 31% of the U.S. workforce was considered contingent contractors. In 2015, in 4 years, it's going up to 40%. And this is before portable health care. So we believe strongly that this number could go up to 45% and soon to over 50% of the U.S. workforce will be contract labor. No more 9 to 5, no more pension, no more benefits. It'll all be independent and freelance. And once again, companies are starting to prepare for that trend. So let's get our notepads and talk about a little of those some of those companies. And of course, that's the IBM. That's the IBM iPad. So the new way, freelance sites. So if you're a freelancer, you probably know sites like this, right? Elance, probably the biggest site out there for independent freelance work. SoloGig, The Worker, which was CyberCoder, and Guru, which is a local company, and now Solvay, which is the latest one, which does project management. Combined with all of these companies that specialize in freelance work, we're close to 50 million registered users that are actively using freelance websites to solicit jobs. The next category is social jobs. JobVite. JobVite software is designed to specifically for companies who want to use social media technology to solicit workers. WorkBeast. WorkBeast is an interesting model. This is a referral model, much like Loud Mountain, which is you sign up for WorkBeast, you essentially put your contacts into a database, WorkBeast contacts, and if jobs become available, you can make recommendations are made through you, and if those connections are made, you receive a percentage of the work that's delivered. Bounty Jobs. This is another aggregate. This is an interesting site too. This is where instead of having one, typically you'd go to a headhunter and look for a job. You have your resume, you go to a headhunter, they have connections to multiple companies, and now you use that headhunter to help you find a job. More personal than putting your application on Monster. But what Bounty Jobs has done is aggregated now all the headhunters. So now if you want to put your job into their database, you can access to over 100 headhunters that will help you find a job. Notch Up is a very similar one, which says that it uses your social network, both your Facebook and your LinkedIn connections, that will help you connect to jobs. And then Wickwire, there's 100 of these companies that are getting very specific around disciplines. This is in the restaurant business. So if you own a restaurant or you work in the field, this is a specialized website that helps you find a job within that industry. Crowdsourcing is the last one. This is probably the biggest trend right now. Mechanical Turk was number one, which is an amazing, and the success of this site is unbelievable. Crowdflower and 99 Designs, which is one for specifically around graphic design. And LiveWork is the latest. This just came live, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, the process. All these websites basically do the same thing. And the process is this. It takes a very large network of people, millions of people, and it says, what we're going to do is dissect it into smaller groups, right? Now, this is our membership, but we select it into smaller groups. And then what the software does and the sites do is leverage those networks to find individuals that will be qualified for a specific job. And each and every one of the sites I just talked to you about, except for the crowdsourcing necessarily, do the exact same process, which says they have a membership, you sign up, some are paid, some are free, and basically the site leverages your personal contacts and your network contacts to find you work, help you find a colleague a job. And our site does a very similar thing, where you sign up, you're an IT person, you sign up, you're a software engineer, network engineer, you're looking for a job, or you're a hiring manager, it's the same thing. You receive a job posting, the job posting. If you know someone in the network that you think is a good person that would fill that job, you could make a referral, just like you could make a referral every day naturally. And if you make multiple referrals and they make referrals, the next thing you know, you can make a decent amount of money by doing something you do naturally every day, which is refer your colleagues into a job. So anyway, enough about Loud Mountain. And so the title here is about Monster being I would say the word is dead, but the idea here is really that as we see Web 1.0 technology morph into Web 2.0 technology, and we see job boards going away, what we see clearly is that the winners of the next wave of recruiting and talent management will be companies that have large communities of very specifically skilled individuals around disciplines, healthcare, energy, and technology. And there's probably, in the last 18 months, there were over 100 companies that were created and incorporated in this space alone. So, and it's taken advantage of what we all see, which is the tremendous growth of social networking. Any questions?
So who does it benefit most, the way things are going? Does it benefit the job seeker or the person seeker?
It actually depends, but I think it helps both organizations. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about a technology company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
There's a ton of companies that come out of Pitt, out of CMU, that have very specific skill sets that they need for their employees.
Right.
And so they could have experts in bio, pharmaceutical technologies, software as a second skill. And where do they find these people? Well, there's maybe 200, 300, 400 people in the world that may be qualified for a position. Mm-hmm. So a small startup company, they don't have the resources to find those individuals. Mm-hmm. And so what they can do to these networks is leverage personal relationships and contacts. And they can find people around the world that have those skills. Crowdsourcing is the same way. The idea behind crowdsourcing is that it takes smaller pieces of, it brings people, it eliminates barriers of geography, time, distance, and it brings people together in a very efficient way for corporations. From an employer standpoint, it's a very tremendous benefit, mm-hmm. right? Especially for finding, in the first case, finding very hard find people,
skills, yeah.
find skills, and for other organizations who are trying to reduce cost, and because they want to bring a lower cost of work, it helps them as well. Mm-hmm. Now, on the employee, if you're looking for a job,
right?
Okay. If you're looking for a job, one of the biggest problems that most organizations have, or most people have, is when they make a decision about working somewhere, do they really know the organization? Mm-hmm. Right? Do they know the culture? Do they know what it's like to work in that company? And the idea behind these social networks and being able to use networks like this, you have a much better sense and communicate with people that either work there in the past or currently work there, that have a much better sense that you're going to be a good fit in that organization.
And so is it working well for, the reason I'm asking, I know a lot of my friends have kids graduating from college right now, and their children are some of them are having a really hard time with their special skills. This
right.
sounds like a place that the children should be looking
right.
In all of those places if they're not already.
Right, because they have, by using these sites, not just Monster, which is so big, they really, if you have a special skill, mm-hmm. there's some website out there, some community that's dedicated to that specific discipline. You have a much better success at finding those individuals. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you on the flip side, we work with a couple of defense contractors, and their skills are extremely sensitive, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're top secret. They've got high language capabilities. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of high technology capabilities, mm-hmm. and there's not that many folks around the planet that have those skills. But we are able to find them very quickly because of the interpersonal relationships in the network. So it gives them a tremendous advantage.
So in doing something like that, you still be able to preserve some privacy, because the other thing I would think is if they're leveraging your network of people, you know, I don't know, that would be kind of difficult, you know, I think about.
No, and each company handles it differently. Some companies are very loosey-goosey with their privacy. Other companies are extremely take it very seriously, and like our company. But we you know, the fact of the matter is, this is one of the biggest decisions you make in your career and one of the most sensitive. And so it's a very important, I think it's one of the major concerns. As a matter of fact, there's a bill in Congress right now, legislation being drafted, that will force companies, it will restrict companies from actually using any information that they receive on social networking sites like Facebook. So if your Facebook profile is public, or MySpace, or Twitter, any of that information that's out there cannot be evaluated by companies. Potentially in the future, if the legislation passes through Congress and signed by the president.
That would be really hard to
enforce.
Yes.
I
mean, because those of us with grown-up children say to them, look, you know, don't be posting things that aren't inappropriate.
Right. No, I have 2 kids in college. I know that's the same thing. And the biggest demographic actually is parents of college kids, because they want to keep track once they leave the house what they're doing. And so if parents are doing it, you know employers are going to be doing it. And I know we don't necessarily do it, but I know a lot of employers do it, but they won't say they do it. But they
It's
do
not
do
just
it.
employers, it's colleges.
What's that?
Colleges will look at high school student photos.
Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, it's everyone. I mean, the first thing you do when you meet anyone anymore is you Google them immediately.
Right.
You know?
Immediately.
And as an employer, I mean, I want to make sure that my employees are posting appropriate things about.
There's actually companies out there now that will protect your identity. So I just, I listened to Pandora. Most of you probably heard the same commercials. There's companies out there now that will monitor the web for your profile and see if there's anything out there that they think is wrong. They'll go out and try to clean it up for you.
I know a lot of colleges use it just within the college.
Really?
Yeah, I graduated from Point Park University, and Point Park had a couple of problems with certain students who were either put on probation or removed from the school. I don't remember the story specifically, but they were removed because of things they had posted, and then they tried to say it never happened. And I mean, when you have a school where there's any college, I mean, there's often underage drinking on campus, and if you can prove in a picture that you found somewhere, it's worth 1,000 words, and someone said, well, that's my personal site.
Right.
You can't use that, and they did.
Right.
So,
there's no question about it.
yeah.
I mean, but the flip side is you can walk a fine line and you can totally leverage it for your advantage.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've gotten 4 jobs between Twitter and Facebook.
Right.
And LinkedIn accounts for a couple others. I mean, I was able to go in, perfectly use the medium. I got connected to Apple. I mean, I ended up working at Apple corporate through Facebook, essentially, and like doing proper messaging and stuff like that.
65%, I think the number came out last year, 65% of college graduates receive their first position through a contact they received at Facebook. 65%. And that's why the whole idea behind Monster being dead is that Monster is going to die because of that exact reason. The demographics going to change, and folks, I mean, as the average age of the Facebook user, and I'm picking on Facebook obviously because really that's the only player out there. I mean, there isn't anybody else out there. You're either business and LinkedIn, or you're on Facebook and social. Twitter is a completely different animal, but it's the only two sites out there that really matter today. And so what's going to happen with Facebook, is my prediction, and I think I'm not alone in this, is that as the demographic gets older, eventually what they're going to do is they're going to commercialize. Once they go public and they have stockholders to answer to, they'll figure out ways, if they haven't already, to commercialize that connection. And when they do that, it's going to be a whole different world. Yeah. You're going to now find your job through a paid service on Facebook like you do at LinkedIn. Right? So LinkedIn makes $110 million a year in revenue. 1/3 of that revenue, that was 2 years, actually, that figure's 6 months old. But 1/3 of that revenue came from recruiters. People that paid access so they can get names of resumes and people. And so that's LinkedIn. And so Facebook is what? It is 10 times larger. It's tenfold in size and in reach. And so what's going to happen is LinkedIn eventually, or Facebook eventually is going to, it will commercialize their service. And you know what? They'll get pushback from some of the folks that are purists around Facebook, but you know what? They're not going to care.
Are you saying commercialized as far as looking for jobs or in general?
I think in general. But jobs will be one of them.
Right now, with their ads, it's a very Google approach. Like the ads along the side and really piecemealing it. And I mean, it's so cheap to post an ad on Facebook.
Right.
And what I saw actually recently is I'm a fan of a production company out in Los Angeles, and this girl had specifically bought ad space targeting anyone who was a fan of that company. Ashton Kutcher happens to own the company, and she had bought an ad saying, "Hey, hire me! I totally love Catalyst," and did the whole target. I think Facebook is already there in some ways of making money. I mean, it's not public yet, but I'm pretty sure they're.
Number one, yes, you're right. And I guess what I'm referring to more is premium services. For instance, in LinkedIn as a company, right, as a recruiting company, I can go to LinkedIn and pay more money to get greater access to the information.
Right.
And in Facebook, you can't do that. They tried to do that, but they got pushed back pretty early.
Right.
But that's what I'm talking about. Where commercial companies, product companies that are selling something will come in and pay extra that greater access than everyone else. And in the ad world, it's a whole different story because everyone's equal.
Right.
It's just a matter of how much money you want to pay for the ads.
You were showing on Monster, the search for a software engineer, but 7-Eleven was coming up.
Right.
So, and it's my understanding that only like 1% of people get hired on Monster. I mean,
Yes.
I have a sister who just graduated from Cornell Law School, and I would never tell her to look on Monster.
Right.
Because it's so flooded. Why are companies using it?
Yeah.
If I work at 7-Eleven, why would I even bother? I was just wondering what your thoughts are on why would people spend money on it if it's so unsuccessful?
It's amazing, isn't it? Because it was the only game in town at one point in time. And that's all these companies that I showed you, all of those companies are less than 2 years old. And so these are the companies that will come up and basically destroy the Monster model.
Can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for Loud Mountain?
Sure.
Where did the idea come from?
No, I'd be happy to. So I started my career as a software engineer, and I was a contractor, so I was billed out a lot. So I worked at different companies, whether in defense and finance. And then I got into management, became the CIO of the city of Pittsburgh. And then for systems we sold for a lot of money about 8 years ago. And I hired a lot of people. I had up to 300 people reporting to me with a budget of close to, 1 year was $60-70 million. And I hired probably in my 10 years career as a CIO, probably $300 million of IT services. And so when I was that product, when I bought that product, and then eventually when I started my own companies, I sold that product. And I realized that all through, there was a fundamental disconnect in the customer and the buyer, right? I mean, the buyer and the product. It was a horrible business. Staffing firms, recruiting firms, consulting firms had a horrible reputation. And the reason why they did that was because of the fact that we didn't use what I think is the most important thing, which is recommendations. If you look at hiring somebody, probably too much information you wanted, but if you look at the process of hiring an individual, whether it's a contractor or an employee, you look at three basic things. You look at their education, which is a fairly objective piece of intelligence, right? You can tell the person has the intellectual capital to do a certain job based on their degree, especially if it's a U.S. school that you were familiar with. Second thing is experience. Well, if you look at a resume today, it's really an exercise in creative writing. Number one, you don't even have to write it anymore. You can hire someone to do it. You could crowdsource your resume if you wanted to. And so it really doesn't give you a good sense of what that person is. The last thing that we just use as checkoff boxes is the recommendation. Who referred this individual into the job? What were the recommendations? Now you see this on LinkedIn all the time, people giving these silly recommendations. They don't mean anything. They're not accountable for anything. And so what we have done in our model is if you refer somebody in, so if you we send a job to our members, and if a member goes out and they refer someone into a position, and that person gets the job, you receive a large percentage of the commission on that. But when you do that, you put your reputation on the line, because we take that, we measure that, we call that the credibility index. Much like you would do on eBay. If you ever bought or sold anything on eBay, you go on to eBay and you make a decision on whether you're going to buy something based on the seller's index. And what we do is we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, that was going to be my question of, I have stayed away from giving, and I actually would sort of prefer people don't put recommendations on LinkedIn, because there's a lot of them that just seem like hot air. And I've looked at other people's profiles that I would never recommend.
Right.
And see their recommendations, and because there's sort of no credibility skill, I've
Exactly.
shied away from that feature. So
Right.
it's really interesting to hear how you.
Yeah, and that's what we did. That's actually started the patents that I filed was around the credibility index for personal reference. So that we will do a customer satisfaction survey of employers after we place them there, as a consultant, contractor, or employee. And based on that determines your credibility index. Your credibility index is directly related to how much money you can make on our site. If you refer good people, you'll make a lot of money. If you refer bad people, you basically get you get removed from the site. Your recommendations are not accepted any longer. And so that's really the secret of our model, in a sense, is that we protect if you're going to make a referral, it now matters. Period. Full stop.
So over the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of social networks come, which are like these referring communities, especially if you look at the recruiting industry outside the US. A lot of these companies existed for a few years and died, and were all basically recruiting networks with referral model based.
Like Zupka?
Yeah, and I forget some names as
Yeah.
well, or read a white paper
Right.
on that sometime.
Right.
So, you're saying could you tell a little bit more about how you...
We looked at a lot of
mitigate
those.
some
The
of
work
those?
piece is another one. And there's a couple of other ones that are like that. We do two things that we take into consideration. Number one, we measure the quality of the referral. And it matters because it ends up being money out of your pocket. So, for instance, in our network, I didn't really go into it, but we actually pay 3 levels. So if Albert refers Bob, and then later Bob refers Charlie, and then Charlie refers David, actually Albert gets a percentage of all of the commissions that are made throughout all 3 of those levels, just like you do in LinkedIn. Now it's very small, but it adds up, right? So now all of a sudden you're making hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars a month based on the referrals that you make. Now, not the person that they make, but your referrals. And all of a sudden, if you make bad referrals, because A, you're greedy, or B, you're lazy, or C, you're uneducated, and you didn't spend the time to understand the situation, then your numbers, you basically lose that opportunity for financial gain. And it's not hard work, right? It's something you probably do every day. And so that's why we think we're going to be different. Most of these other referral sites don't put any quality index in it. They don't. And they don't tie it back to compensation. That's probably the biggest thing that makes us different. And there's a whole other thing that it's probably too detailed to go into here, but we also do competency-based scoring. So we actually take a job description and we base it on competencies. There's 7 competencies around work, and there's 7 competencies around people that actually do the work. And we actually score that as a separate analysis and do that comparison. And that's what we use the recommendation engine for. I'm not sure if you're familiar with recommendation engines, but Amazon is the biggest one. eHarmony is a recommendation engine. Pandora, Netflix is Netflix put the $1 million award this year for recommendation engine, and their stock's $143 a share because they use recommendation engine. We are building at a core level a recommendation engine is similar as you would see in eHarmony. And that's really technology that hasn't been used in any of these sites before. Referral sites where I know Joe's a good guy, he goes out, I get some money, and transaction's over. There's no long-term incentive and commitment to it. So one thing is we tie our incentives into long term, and 2, we throw some science behind this too. So we score the compatibility of a resume and a test, not a knowledge test. So if someone says they're a Java developer, we don't test them on Java. We test them on other attributes of whether it's quality, behavior, psychology, all those other domains. So we have some science we overlay on top of that.
So basically, if someone makes a referral, you check with your
Engine.
engine before you go
Yes.
forward.
Yes. And that's why we think we'll scale much. And the idea behind the engine is that we'll scale. So even at the monster, at that level of matching those numbers, 1 million resumes or 1 million jobs and 40 million resumes, we'll never get to that size, obviously, but our engine should be able to handle something that large. The problem is, and not that this may be interesting or not, I don't know. But here's the problem. The reason why eHarmony works so well, is because it has figured out, they have figured out, that what you would typically see in a dating service in the way of questioning was wrong, and it was not enough. And so what eHarmony did was said, okay, look, there's this 29 dimensions of compatibility, it scored them in a scientific manner, and then it did the comparison. That's what made eHarmony. Think about the way we do it today. We take a job description, right, that comes in a newspaper, just a job description. It doesn't tell you anything about the company. It doesn't tell you anything about the culture. It doesn't tell you about anything like that, even what the job's going to be like. It may have some list of knowledges that you need to know, or knowledge and skills, but that's it. The resume is the same thing. The resume is not who you are. So when you combine two things that are imperfect, your level of uncertainty is pretty big. And that's what the problem is with most of these sites. Well, actually, I would say all of these sites. Now, that's going to change because now recommendation engines, CMU, the thing that we know so much about them is because we're working with CMU, we're working with students from CMU, because the two disciplines around recommendation engines, CMU has two programs within their School of Computer Science, one in robotics, one in natural language processing. And those are the sciences behind these recommendation engines. Whether it's Netflix, whether it's Pandora, whether it's Amazon. If you think about it, I'll finish on this thought about recommendation engines. When Amazon, you look at Amazon and you say, look, Amazon just sells books online. No, Amazon fundamentally changed the way people buy them. They were the first company to come up with a recommendation engine. They were the first organization that figured out, I can pull a community and grab information about what is the next book after I read this one. And that is a powerful piece of information. And that's why Amazon is today Amazon, right? And no one is doing that yet in matching employees with employers. And the problem is, here's the problem. As I stated in the beginning of this thing, we're going to have a massive, and maybe not in my lifetime, but in your lifetime back there, in your lifetime, you're going to have a massive labor shortage. And then now, the selection process and making sure that you get the right person is going to be that much higher. Now, to your benefit, if you understand what you need to do in your own career, you can take advantage of that, right? You can do the things that are right to make you look more attractive in the marketplace.
Can I ask a little bit of a different. So,
Sure.
One, are you just focusing on IT or potential?
We're on IT right now, but we're going into healthcare and energy next.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my other question is, and speaking of generations, my parents are in their 60s and I'm 30 years old, and they're not ready to retire because they don't want to, but they don't want to work crazy hours.
Right.
I've had a different career every year for the past 8 years, and I have for the past 5 years had 2 or 3 different jobs plus consulting jobs on top of it. Sometimes I love it and sometimes I hate it. What do we do with this generation from age 60 to 85 that has tremendous amount of knowledge? I think they're willing to work for less, but they don't want to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. Have you dealt with this at all? Because there's this tremendous brain trust, but they want the ability, I think my dad would love the ability to work noon to 4 or noon to 5.
There are
Some level of flexibility. I have a lot of flexibility, but how can we manage this tremendous amount of human capital, but this sort of culture shift of careers that your butt has to be in your seat at your office from 9 to 5, and I think that's what people are sort of getting away from.
And they didn't put them up there, but there are multiple sites doing that now. So there are, in the same category as what I described, there are sites, websites, communities for that exact thing, right? Some are nonprofits was saying donate your time
Right.
for no money, but some are no, actually tapping into those experiences.
And then as
And
somebody,
AARP is actually sponsoring a couple of these sites.
as
Actually.
somebody who's looking to hire, I just hired an accountant and I've hired an attorney. I'd be much happier to hire somebody who's only work, I want to pay less because I'm price sensitive as a startup. But, I don't need big law firm pricing. I'm thrilled that my accountant is not located downtown. And
Right.
I don't want you to serve me fancy cookies when I come. I don't want to pay that price. I just want you to get the work done.
Right.
So I think I'm excited about the potential of the internet to sort of allow careers to not look so 9 to 5 and allow people a lot of flexibility. And I was just wondering if you've dealt with that at all in terms of hiring. Are you
Yes.
looking to hire people that are, available 80 hours a week, or are you open to taking a higher level person with more flexibility?
Well, I guess, so there's multiple questions in there, so let me take the last one first. Unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you want to look at it, startups are a different animal, right? So startups, you come in, you work 60 hours a week. That's and for low pay, but you get a lot of cookies in the kitchen. That's pretty much it. So there's and although what I've started to do is to bring people in that own relationships. So people that are salespeople or ex-executives of organizations, and I bring them in as a conduit for sales and relationship building. But from kind of a tactical do work every day, none. But there are plenty of companies that can do that. I'll give you a good example. So this is and I know my cousin is pursuing this. He bought a garage because a friend of his wanted to buy a garage. That was his thing. My cousin did well for himself, so he gave him the money to buy a garage. Well, the guy is a great mechanic, but doesn't know anything about business. So I said, you need to go online and you need to find a retired accountant, right? A retired somebody to go out and do the books for this guy, right? And he'd be happy to do it, or she would be happy to do it, just to get out of the house and go work, hang out in a garage. And then he started realizing there's plenty of sites that are doing that. And now he's finding that talent. And he found that 68-year-old accountant that worked at J&L Steel and worked at US Steel and now is going to go and do the accounting for, and everyone's a winner. And so yes, that I believe that is going to be one of the answers to our labor shortage. And that is going to be tapping into this, what we call talent by the drink, the resources by the drink, crowdsourcing, but crowdsourcing in a very specific area.
I think it's much more an issue of cultural shift.
It is.
I've had, my parents have worked very corporate jobs, and there's this very different entity of,
Right.
I'm sure I work more than 40 hours a week, but
Right.
it's often not between 9 and 5.
Right.
And I think it's rethinking it. It's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Mothers are all into that.
Yeah, mothers are into what?
Into having flexible time.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like I run a small IT consulting company.
Okay.
And my customers want to talk to me 8 to 5, so that's when I have to be available
Right, exactly.
for them.
Right.
So my techs have to be there 8 to 5.
Right,
I may not be there because I'm not the person. I do sales and management.
right,
But
right.
the guy who comes in and puts your antivirus
Now
on,
he has to, well, there's,
his
right,
butt better be in the chair at 8 o'clock in the morning.
exactly right.
So.
Right. No, I agree with you there. I agree with you. Now, but which is interesting, though, taking it off a little bit, there's the same technology that's allowing us to do this, the stuff that actually, the infrastructure that makes this work is what we call cloud computing. And all of us probably have heard of what cloud computing is. You know it very well. Cloud computing is providing that same flexibility, so you don't have to have a tech in the seat.
Right. I have to have him somewhere.
Right, but it doesn't have to be in the seat.
He doesn't have to be in the seat. For now, he's in his seat. But for us, for me, I mean, we do a lot of work. My head tech doesn't have is doing work at night because everyone has to be off the network to do certain things. So we're doing that in the evening. Cloud computing is a whole other ball of wax though, because I have a lot of traditional companies who are not ready.
Well, and it's funny you should say that because we work with a partner company that handles all our competency-based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, I manage data centers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And fault-tolerant, redundant data centers around the world. Things that could take just about, bomb blasts and still survive because of the criticality of the data. We don't have one server. And we'll never have a server.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and to me it was no problem. Now the problem Right now, it's privacy around HR data, HIPAA data, that kind of stuff that we'll get around it. But it's just a matter of time.
It
It's just
is.
a matter of time.
And they're still going to need someone to come in and, you know, put those computers in the network and deal with whatever goes on. There's still going to be something going on,
Right.
but the cloud, the people aren't ready for the cloud
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah.
And the same people who are on the cloud, who have their equipment in-house, are not ready for all their backup to be online either.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't go from bare metal with an online backup.
Right.
It has to have something on it to put something,
Right.
to go to the internet to get it.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a whole nother ball.
Yeah, it'll just take time. It reminds me of that funny story during the debate for healthcare, where this woman in this town hall meeting got up and said to was a senator, actually, it must actually was the president, and said, "Look, I don't want government messing around with my Medicare."
There you go. And
And the president just looked and kind of smiled and said, "Would you know who really this you know?"
where Medicare comes from? Yeah, I know. Well, thank you very much.
You used to do information for the city of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So where is technology in government going? 'Cause
Where's technology? Where?
in government going? Because I sort of, my feeling is like we've just started to scratch the surface in terms of improving government efficiency with technology.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm a political junkie, and that's why I got the job, I guess, at the city, and I've been following it very closely. This administration, from a federal standpoint, has finally did some very interesting things. We'll see what happens, but they've actually now have, you go to it, it's called Government in the Cloud. Type in Government in the Cloud, and what they're trying to do is they're mimicking Apple's App Store. So now you can go in, any government agency can go online now, and if I'm, human services or I'm transportation, I can go into Government in the Cloud and actually buy and rent applications. Now, it's not really working yet, but that's where the trend is going. So there's an interesting, it's a movement, which is good. I mean, it's far from going to get there, but the federal government, just like all local jurisdictions, there's so many fiefdoms and power control. That's the problem with the IT systems and information. But I think that I'm positive, I'm hopeful that we're getting in the right direction. What we spend in IT at the state, local, federal levels in IT is unbelievable, and more than half is wasted. I know that for a fact. More than half is wasted.
Many of my customers, they could have so much better stuff with less.
Well, I can tell you, I can give you an example, right? 6 weeks, what is this? Right? In 2 weeks, the federal government budget will be closing, right? October 1st is the federal fiscal year. By August 15th to October 1st, a 6 week period of time, the federal government spent $58 billion in IT. Just because they had the money that they needed to spend in their budgets. $58 billion. How does one organization spend $58 billion in IT in 6 weeks?
I don't know.
And they did it.
Yeah, they
And
did.
they did it.
I have a few municipal customers who wait till this time of the year and call me up and say,
I got money in my budget.
I got
What can I
money.
buy?
yeah, well, and I say, would have been nice if you would have gotten the stuff when you needed it and we didn't have to work on the piece of crap that you've been having sitting on your desk for a
Right.
year. Maybe
Right.
that would have been a better idea, but I'll sell you something.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem. There's plenty of vendors that are going to sit there and still do it. You can't.
Yeah. No, I'd rather have, a better solution for them.
But I think the answer to better government is better systems and better processes. And it's easier said than done. Let me tell you, it's easier said than done.
Well, then you might have to improve the infrastructure, because compared to, I was in Europe this spring, and compared to there, it's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Well,
You know.
it's even, I spent many an afternoon, I used to work on political campaigns.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Many an afternoon in the elections office.
Locally?
Keying in finance reports.
Mhm.
Some of this stuff, the amount of paperwork of me taking it, as the finance manager for a campaign, taking it from my computer, printing it out, turning it in.
Right.
In terms of increasing, the data that goes from computer to paper to paper to computer, and the amount of time spent. is fascinating.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And I
You know.
get stories. Like
Yeah.
I'll give you a good story, right? So when I started at the city in '94 as the CIO, and I was a young kid at the time, and to your report, the financial reports. There's actually 2 departments that create financial reports in the city. Right? There's the controller's office, which is the auditor, and there's the Office of Budget Management and Budget. And it's 2 financial organizations, right? One's the finance, OMB, which works for the executive branch, and the controller's office that works for a different branch of government. The report is generated originally in OMB. It is put in binders, and it's about that thick, right? And it is put into a wheelbarrow, and it is transferred over to the controller's office, where they go back in and now re-enter the data. Not anymore, but that's what they used to do. That was in 1994.
Do you know how hard it is for me to convince someone to put a scanner, that they're going to scan things that come into their office so they don't have to have a paper copy? Do you know how hard that is?
Yeah.
It's almost impossible.
I can't feel it, I can't see it, I can't, it's not there.
Yeah, if I can't put it in a drawer,
Yeah.
if I can't kill it,
Right.
I'm like, hey, they got these great desktop scanners. You can put it right in.
I know.
You can
And actually, it would
back
read
up.
it for you.
Yeah, it'll read it. It'll do things with it. We can back it up. 4 ways to Sunday. You can access it from. Nope. I want to put it in my file.
That's right.
Well, next
Some
thing-
things don't say.
next